entitlement proxy. Then there's one from Shady, asking about how to build apps for data science. Yeah, what's like a minimal way to get started? And I think Lee posted a point back to the identity and NFT question about, or that he's interested about that in kind of the context of the music industry.
Awesome. So yeah, Joel, do you have, Joel or everyone, other core devs, anything that you want to share or discuss that's changed or improved since the last community call? That way we can just sort of put everything down and figure out where to go. I guess, Joel, it probably makes sense for you to talk about did NFT since that's new.
We can start there.
Okay.
So sorry, I don't have my video on. For some reason, my camera is not working today. I think I need to reboot my computer or something. Anyway, so did NFT was a spec I wrote like a while back, and I think it was last weekend, I hacked together kind of like a prototype for it. So like now you can go to Ceramic Network /NFT did resolver on GitHub to kind of see the prototype. So this is kind of the minimal implementation that kind of allows you to verify signatures of the most recent owner of the NFT did as like being valid. The thing that's like missing in that implementation is the ability to look at an old signature that comes from like a previous owner and still verify that that was valid at a previous point in time.
Joel, it might be helpful for you to share your screen and just sort of review the standard in case everyone hasn't seen it, and then potentially show us the did resolver.
Yeah, that's a good point. Just give me a second.
Just like recapping what it is, what it does, how it can work with IDX, sort of all of those main points.
Yes. All right.
I assume that your screen sharing will work even without video.
Yeah, I think so. So maybe just to zoom out completely. A DID method is a way to bootstrap trust from like a short identifier that's just like a short string to a document which contains a public key and other kind of metadata information about an identifier. So usually like what's most useful for is going from an identifier that's like persistent to a document which contains like a public verification key and a public encryption key. So you can encrypt a message to that identifier, and you can verify a signature from that identifier. So that's kind of generally what DID methods are, and that's like a W3C standard. DIDs are also something that we use inside of Ceramic as kind of the main way to authenticate updates to documents in Ceramic. So the NFT did method is basically an idea that we had and started working on for what if every NFT that exists on like any blockchain was actually a DID method where the owner of the DID becomes the one that can like make signature on behalf of that identity. And also if someone wants to encrypt a message to the NFT, like they would encrypt it to the current owner. So the NFT did method is basically a thing that does that. So we have like a DID identifier that's based on like the blockchain, the smart contract, and like the ID, token ID for the specific NFT. And then what happens is basically we use something in Ceramic called a Type10 link, which is basically a way to link a blockchain account to a DID method. And I'm not going to go too deep into like how the DID specification works, but basically we put the ID of the owner of the NFT as like a controller of the NFT which makes it possible for all the kind of verification methods, like the ways to verify signatures and encrypt messages, of the owner becomes also like verification methods of the NFT did. So that's kind of high level what this is. And the reason we want that in Ceramic is a few things. So like, or I guess the basic thing is just like having the ability to have a Ceramic document that is kind of owned and controlled by the current owner of an NFT. And that allows us to do like maybe like collaborative artworks or like a guest book or kind of event tracking of like like an NFT that like flows through some kind of provenance use case where every owner kind of adds some information about what happened to this NFT during its lifetime.
Hi, Zachary. Service BC calling you from Seminar. I'm calling to follow up with the whole.
Okay, I think that was a mistake. Thanks for muting. All right, so that's kind of the general use case. But one thing that's cool is, so in Ceramic, we also have IDX, which is like a way to store kind of general identity information associated with the DID. And if we use that in combination with the NFT did, we basically get like kind of tradable identities, or like identities that, you know, you have a bunch of attributes that you can like send back and forth and like have the control over those attributes be like something that's like governed by an NFT. Yes, I think that's like high level what it is. Did I miss something, Michael?
No, yeah, I would just like talk about and expand on some of the use cases. So basically, like today, NFTs are really just, you know, the media hash or the media URI associated with this asset that it points to. And what NFT did is it sort of opens up NFTs to become automatically like rich identities of their own that are managed or controlled by the current owner of the NFT. And that becomes like a really powerful primitive for enabling NFTs to have like to own a richer content universe. So it's not just limited to that media hash that might sort of be the image that's displayed with an NFT, but rather NFTs could begin to build their own social graphs or could begin to build their own content universe, all sort of stored in IDX. So IDX is a way to associate any kind of like arbitrary but semantically meaningful information. So you can have an NFT that like makes its own blog posts, or you can have an NFT that follows other NFTs, or you could do all sorts of things that allow the like the social interactions or the dynamism around these assets to grow. And as soon as that NFT is traded or is moved to a new owner, that content's not lost. And it's actually tradable in the same way that the underlying asset is. So it's not stored on a single server because it's stored in Ceramic. It's not sort of trapped in any way. It actually becomes as fluid as the asset. And, you know, the thinking is if assets today are really limited to like a single media file, that sort of determines the value of an NFT. But if you have content that can continue to be updated over time, and even, you know, do all sorts of things that we can't even imagine, it helps to improve the overall value of the NFT. There's more stuff and like a richer history associated with this single thing. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, thanks. We got a question in the chat from Lee. Yeah, if you want to like describe kind of what you're thinking and see if that kind of fits into this.
So guys, I'm new to, you know, blockchain and NFTs, but I'm a music business guy, and I've worked, and I've been pulled in and a technical guy. I've done a lot with identity, OAuth, done a bunch of work at the Universal Music Group, introducing single sign-on OAuth for Spotify, initially Facebook and Twitter. And so that's deployed there. And long story short, I understand these interfaces from a business perspective. I also know that I worked on fan clubs for artists there. And as I talk to my cohorts in the music business, they're trying to figure out how to get into the NFT play from a major label or a label perspective. I think there's a lot of, let's not talk about it from a creative perspective, like I've created this work, but let's say, how does this fit into the business model? And the one I can sort of talk to is people are trying to make the NFT almost like a permanent membership card. And so the example I'll give that everyone I think has seen is Kings of Leon's golden ticket. Now, if I'm going to assume everybody knows about that, but the NFT for a limited number of people got a ticket for life front row seats. I know behind the scenes, that's basically a Google sheet with the email address of who bought that. There's no real technology going on for all the talk of an NFT. And I know also behind the scene, the road manager has to go keep that person in mind, and they have to do it for life. I think the use cases to sort of extend what I understand what Joel said is, could an NFT, the fact that I own it, act as what I call an entitlement server, proof of ownership of something that has real world benefits. So I own this NFT and the band will now put me on the VIP list. Can I show up at a concert with some device and show a QR code that's proxied by the NFT? Or can I show up at the band's merch store and like a membership card, prove ownership? From what I've gathered in my research, and it's limited, until I saw this forum and stumbled on IDX and Ion and you guys, that NFT as a proxy for entitlement or ownership didn't exist. I saw identity and I saw cryptocurrency, but this is, I think, the sweet spot, because, and here's why, and I'm sorry to go on.
Yeah, so it's really,
one quick thing, and I just want to finish and I'm going to stop talking. It's where all the other rights holders get a play in the sandbox. The artist may generate an NFT original work and make a lot of money from that, but they need to work with their label partners or their merch partners or the ticketing partners and say, I'm now going to give away front row seats, and here's an easy way for you to do that with this membership. I think that's why I'm saying trying to carve out a solution that lets other business partners work with the artist beyond just creating a high-priced GIF. I'm sorry to sort of simplify it like that. Okay, that's the real world use case I'm interested in.
Cool. So I have, I'm sure there's like a bunch of angles at this, but I'm going to throw like one at you that I think could make sense for you. So it's interesting that you mentioned OAuth, because there is work happening in some standard groups for adding DID support in OAuth. So you can basically like have some kind of OAuth flow where you sign in using a DID. So like with that, you could basically have, if the DID that you like allow into the server is the NFT did, and you have like on your server or whatever, like you have a list of NFTs that are allowed, then anyone that owns that NFT now can use that as a DID to authenticate to that OAuth endpoint or service. That's just like one thing that came to my mind. I don't know if that's like, covers all of it, or like covers a small piece of it, but that's just like top of mind.
That's a model that works really well. Maybe in the chat, I'll send a link out to something that launched yesterday for Justin Bieber. But what it means is the OAuth, there were two things. We did identification for Spotify. And then we've done some scenarios, not on this Justin Bieber example, where identity, if you are in the premium tier of Spotify, you got access to content. And if you weren't, it was kind of it was the identity plus a lookup on your status at Spotify. And we incented people, this was years ago, but anyhow, you get the idea. Wow, here's who I am, and here's what I'm entitled to because of some state.
Actually, with this DID and IDX, one could independently attach properties to the NFT. So say an artist sold a bunch of NFTs, and then at some later point, it's not like a lifetime ticket, but some limited, I don't know, limited amount of, say, silver tickets. And then a person goes to some linking server and links that kind of capability to the NFT profile. And then, that person goes, kind of gets that information that's provided independently of the first run to the endpoints that allows some additional action based on that new silver ticket property, and that goes independently of the original kind of proposal, all based on NFT ownership. And this is really interesting to allow dynamic properties to NFT. And that's kind
Michael,
of
stop me. I don't want to. I'll just add it. You stop me if I'm taking this down a rabbit hole.
It's okay. Yeah, well, I mean, this is one of the big things we wanted to talk about this community call. So I would say whenever I feel like we're running up on time, I'll let you know.
Okay, great. So Sergey, I think I understand you, and I'll give you, but I'm going to answer it. In doing research here, I heard people who knew enough technical detail to create that Shopify exclusive fan club, but to me, it felt very hacky and not secure. Basically, you could create an extension to the NFT that effectively acts as a coupon code for Shopify, and you could set up that coupon code in Shopify. And they said, well, then you would have to tell the person how to cut and paste from their NFT this thing that's really not that secure anymore. It's a open free text exchange. And so there are people scrambling to just do a minimal viable product with and I'm really looking for a Shopify plugin, a defined standard that everyone can start to play with, rather than what I call the Kings of Leon, first to market, but really a lot of manual maintenance over the lifetime of that. So that's why I'm really interested in ceramic in this group, because there seemed to be a standards approach to the problem. But stop me if I'm wrong.
No, that's exactly it. I mean, IDX in many ways is a way to organize this information through standard schemas and through standard lookups, like a single place where a user doesn't have to copy and paste a coupon code that, like the site itself or the Shopify plugin could just query the network and verify the ownership with no user interaction needed. And it's sort of immutable based on the state of the network. I think you're muted, Lee.
That's great. So Michael, this is all new to me as of this last week, so I'd love to follow up on this, but I don't want to. Anyhow, you tell me if we're going. I want to make sure we're staying on topic.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, no problem. I think we can definitely either in Discord or have a chat and talk through this specific case more. I know that Graven and Cody at GeoWeb were also thinking of use cases for NFT DID that aren't creative in the same way, but equally based on non-fungible standards.
Yeah, I think the use case for us is actually pretty intuitive. On the GeoWeb, we're essentially an augmented reality metaverse. So our digital land parcels are NFTs. And so utilizing this, we could actually put anchor content. The whole idea of the metaverse is to be able to anchor digital content to these digital land parcels. If the digital land parcel, being an NFT, can own the content that's anchored there, then when the land transfers, so does the content. So it's kind of like putting down a foundation in a house. When you buy the land, you don't just buy the plot of land. You have the foundation, the house, it all comes with it. So it's a really interesting model for us to encourage development of land rather than just speculating on land, building content that's completely divorced from that land.
That's a really interesting metaphor, building up the plot of land, developing the plot of land is contributing more content to this, that's associated with it. Hadn't thought of it like that, but yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it starts. There might be reasons you don't want to do that. If you have your Beeple art on your wall at your house, you might not want to sell that with it. You might want to take it off the wall and go with. But there could be foundational stuff and mirror the real world in that way, and we'll see how it develops.
Hey, this is Izzy, everybody. Hey, Graven. Actually, I think there's a really potential interesting interplay here between the GeoWeb NFT, so an NFT that's anchored to a physical location, and what Lee was talking about with an NFT as a, I don't know how to put this, like a value add proposition in terms of what artists can offer to their fans. So let's say you go to a show for a band and you have an NFT, you know, as like a golden ticket holder, which, okay, maybe gives you backstage access, but also allows you to take a selfie with your friends and throw it up on a digital wall. The access to that digital wall is governed by a GeoWeb NFT, which requires proximity. So you could marry these two things together to enable like a value add proposition that would never otherwise exist. Like you'd either have to do it fully remotely or have somebody clicking all the buttons to do things on the fly during that point in time. But instead you could set up a contract that picks up, you know, that somebody's in the vicinity and has the right authorization. So they have an NFT in their possession, and then allows them to create like an interactive experience that's above and beyond what you normally do when you go to a show.
Yeah.
Izzy, that's, I'm going to connect it to not technology that's not that old, but we used to set up Bluetooth beacons in the venue and with apps, or tell people it was like proof of attendance or just for the people at the show, identify yourself. I had actually, until Raven just put it up, I didn't realize there was such a thing as a geo NFT. How is that authenticated? Is it through a geo detecting device? And that's new to me.
There's still a lot of ways to spoof location, and so right now we're just using plain old GPS, but there's projects like Foam that are trying to have a spoofable location. But so basically our smart contract isn't validating the user visiting the place, but the ownership is validated with geo boundaries, and the control on our network is delineated with geolocation. We essentially built out a grid for the covering the earth and splice it up however we want. So
I'm with Izzy. There's something there where a band goes on tour and there's an NFT available to everybody who attends the show, you know, digital content, live recording, you name it. That's really great.
yeah, we've talked through like airdrops, and obviously there's a lot of games like Pokemon Go. Everyone's familiar with that as kind of like the premier AR thing. So there's ways to have users potentially interact and get things, but what Izzy is talking about, and the flip side of that, of being at the location and actually being able to interact to the thing and push content or information or whatever it is, even just like going to a restaurant and transacting over the GeoWeb when you're there is all within the realm of possibility. Not there yet though.
I also, not to pivot too hard, because we can always circle back to this, but I see Aaron is on, and Aaron's been working on near personas. So basically like profile and account metadata for the near protocol. Aaron, is there anything that you would want to share or demo or just tell the community about for your project?
I don't think there's anything I'm ready to demo today. I was just kind of popping in for the first time for this community call just to see how things are going. So just kind of sitting and watching and taking it all in. But for sure in the future, maybe I'll give you an idea of what I'm working on. If we don't get to it, maybe it's or something we can possibly get to. But I am curious about the test net and the speed with which it's returning stuff. The thing that I'm working on right now, it's pretty slow to use, and I'm just wondering if it'd be quicker if I ran my own ceramic node, or if the test net is just slow at the moment. I'm not sure.
Yep, good point. Sergey, Joel, Spencer.
Well, right now it is a bit on the slower side, but on the upstream code, we achieved like 5 times faster, well, performance. So it's like now indistinguishable from any other API, not like slow as it used to be. And well, it's not released yet, but the code is there, and we tested it. It's really fast. So this problem should go away quite soon.
Okay, it might be something in my code too that is causing it. I'm trying to track it down, but yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, Sergey's been working for the last chunk of time on a complete state refactor. That makes this a lot better. I see a bunch of questions popping in. Joel, do you want to answer? I see you've already got some in the chat. But Adair, are you asking about the did NFT beta version or the ceramic network beta version?
I'm asking about the did NFT version, because I know you can run your own local ceramic nodes, but can we like access the NFT did, because they mentioned that it would need to be added to the ceramic node, but can we run that on our own?
Yeah, I think you can actually use the link you posted, the NFT did resolver. That's sort of the beta version of the did resolver to resolve these NFT dids. And the ceramic node can be configured with whatever sort of did resolver you configure it with. So you can just pass that did resolver into the ceramic node if you run your own ceramic node, you can run it with that.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's like an easy way to do that. Like if you're running the CLI, is there an easy way to like add a new resolver?
On the CLI currently, but.
Yeah, so that would be nice if we could figure out how to do that in a good way, but I'm not sure how that could happen. Right now, you probably need to like run ceramic, either run a modified version of like the ceramic CLI that includes yeah, I think that's what you have to do. You have to like basically make a fork of the ceramic CLI that includes the NFT did resolver. But yeah, hopefully, like we want to include this by default, but hopefully we'd want to also make it easier to like add custom DAD methods when running ceramic. So,
awesome.
But that's where it's at right now.
Joel?
What's up?
Sorry, Adair, I think you missed your question.
Oh, I said awesome, thank you.
Okay, cool. I think we're all cutting out here. Shady, I see you pop back in the chat. So let's talk about that now. So looking to build dApps for science. Can you provide like a bit more context on your use case and sort of like what you're looking to do? We're definitely happy to point you in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Shadi. I'm a PhD in neuroscience. Looking to build apps that utilize DID to get around a lot of the issues regarding personal data when it comes to collecting really intimate images of your insides, right? Like your brains. That's something that, you know, we offhandedly give custody to when we go to the doctors or when we participate in a research study. And things like GDPR and now CCPA and some new laws in Virginia and coming up in Washington are really kind of making scientists rethink about how we deal with privacy and personal data. And, you know, as it turns out, it's a lot simpler if individuals had custody of their data and could, you know, provide if they had the ability to opt in and opt out and and to continuously give their consent. So there are existing standards and, what I guess you would call schemas for neuroimaging data sets that make them interoperable globally, so that anybody anywhere can download particular data sets and run it through some sort of pipeline and get an interoperable representation of that data set derivative. So what I want to do is I want to build a portal or a front end or a web page that allows me to enroll a participant, obtain their consent digitally, associate that with a DID, and upload their data to IPFS in an encrypted format. Hopefully you could also, maybe we might require mutability. So that they could upload their data to IPFS and that we could control the permissions, or that they could individually control the permissions for that. And to have a portal where you can pull data and be interoperable across research sites everywhere to really tackle some of the most really challenging problems in neuroscience, such as different mental health disorders and so on and so forth. I can totally elaborate more. Just that's a quick overview.
I think that gives us enough. Joel, anything to add, or Paul, before I jump in?
I mean, it sounds like, obviously, like authentication and stuff like that is fairly straightforward using DIDs. But once you start like doing encryption, and especially like uploading data to IPFS, there's some things to consider, like do I encrypt it symmetrically, meaning there's like one key that you have to give access, and then because there's two different types of encryption, right? So one is symmetric encryption, which is like just a kind of one-time pad thing, if you're familiar with the details. But there's also asymmetric encryption, which you can encrypt to a public key. Those have like different security considerations. Like symmetric encryption is generally more secure about like quantum computer attacks, whereas asymmetric encryption right now is broken under a quantum computer. So when you upload data to IPFS, you obviously like put it in the public. So like you might either consider like, okay, what's my strategy for like encrypting the data versus maybe I'm fine with like having a server which the data lives on that's like authenticated by the DID if it's like really sensitive data. So those are just like things on top of my mind you can consider. Like obviously like the way we structure like an app that it has data on like a server that is access controlled through a DID. You could put like in IDX, you could put like a pointer to where the server lives. So you have like the core of the data structure where you like route to the data living in this decentralized manner, but then you go to the kind of private hosted server to get the actual data. And of course you can put the data on the server encrypted as well. So you get like an extra layer of security there. But generally like there are a lot of things to consider in this type of system. So I think you should try to consider like what is kind of the main flow of data like that is important, like how to do that well.
Yep. And there's basically like the way I think about it is there's at a minimum like seeking to enable interoperability of resources regardless of where they're stored sort of means you'd want to use a DID and then associate those data resources to that DID in a semantically meaningful way, meaning like publish the schemas and then organize the information according to schemas. And that lets others access that information without needing to know like which entity originally issued the data or created it. So you don't need to know like, oh, this hospital did this imaging, so I need to go into their storage space. It's more like you just look at the user and you say, I need this type of information, and you can figure out where it is. And then what Joel said is the second question is figuring out which storage mechanism you want to use is sort of ultimately like your decision, a developer decision. But the minimum is associating the data to a DID such that in a way that makes it interoperable. And there, I mean, if you want to store it natively on IPFS, you know, you can use Ceramic for static things and mutable things, because a static thing is just a mutable thing that you never change. So it gives you the flexibility to, you know, if you have a brain image and you then get a new scan and they want to like update the state of your brain over time, and you have this like audit trail of new scans and new results, there's a case for, you know, just setting up things in a mutable way that can give you that sort of like time and history traversal if you wanted.
Yeah, if I could just quickly jump in. So yeah, so mutability is really interesting. The neuroscience community has been developing this command line utility called Data Lab, which is, you can think of it as Git plus Git Annex, but specifically for data sets where you keep a huge cache of metadata and pointers. It's really similar actually in concept to IDX, where you have a bunch of, you know, schemas and pointers to resources and methods, where in this case you can run a data lab command to pull a data set, and then it'll have some associated resources such as like, oh, well, it comes from this Google Cloud bucket or this Amazon bucket. And you can pull that data if you have the right keys or authentication, if, you know, given to you by the team. And in this case, what you could do is you could run an analysis, publish it, and say a new software update comes in, say it's a different compilation of a different library, and you can update your analysis, and you have provenance tracking as well. And so this whole concept also of reproducible science and being able to track everything. So that's why mutability is really interesting. So that comment on that. And then the second comment on IPFS and thinking about, you know, first thinking of federated servers, right? Like you could run, probably, I haven't tried this, but I'm thinking you probably do it, run a bunch of IPFS clusters at institutions that have the storage capacity and the bandwidth to, you know, make large neuroimaging data sets instantly accessible for, you know, deep learning analyses that might require, you know, tens of thousands of scans, which, you know, it's like terabytes of data. So yeah, just wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, I think for the IPFS thing, there were like clusters, and yeah, I think actually like there's, I guess there's two ways you can like approach that. Like one is you build a private IPFS network that you communicate to over like HTTPS, or you have some kind of authentication layer in IPFS, and I think that's not something that exists right now, but I think they're working on adding that into kind of the core feature set. Unclear exactly how long that would take, but I think that would be like the optimal, you know, solution, that you give rights to some nodes to store your data, and then those nodes will only give that data to, they will only give out that data to you. So I mean, that seems like a good approach there. I think there is work happening to bring the IDs more natively into IPFS, but that's like a kind of slow-moving project. But I think that's the goal of multiple actors in the community. So yeah, I think it makes sense.
Shadi, anything else we can help answer?
Yeah, so I just would thank you so much, by the way, for the time and lending me your expertise on this. Yeah, it's really cool technology. So in terms of encryption, right? So I totally understand, symmetric encryption versus public-private key pairs, and you need that every time you log into a server, right? If you have SSH keys installed. So on IPFS, is the concern that RSA keys over time will eventually become breakable? Is that idea?
Yeah, so with signatures, of course, they are also, broken by quantum computers. But if you, like, when you're signing something and you have like a DID that has like public keys, and it's the document, then you can always like rotate the keys. And like, if you rotate those keys to like quantum secure keys before, before it becomes a real problem, then you're good. But it's totally different when with like encrypted data, right? Because like if you encrypted the data and that's like publicly available to a asymmetric key, then you can't just like revoke that whole encryption, because like if someone has that data, they have it, and you can't just like magically make that disappear from their computer. So that's kind of the difference between like signatures and like encryption in that case.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I guess I just need to do a little bit more digging and research and figure out if current encryption methods are sufficient for keeping personal data secure, right? And if it's in a public distributed network, is it worthwhile to store health information, even if it's de-identified, right? I mean, eventually, if you're building machine learning models, you can, with enough data, identify somebody, right? With enough images. So yeah, so that's really, really useful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great. Glad it would be helpful. Any other questions or things people want to talk about, top of mind? I guess we can offer an update from our side. Our team and the core development team is still working towards a mainnet early launch program. Hopefully in about a month ish, it should go live, which basically is a mainnet with training wheels. So, getting all of the final changes in and anything that needs to be fixed or improved, and making sure the protocol is stable. And also on our side, working on the 3Box Lab side, working on getting robust, stable infrastructure that runs mainnet. So participants in the program can basically access mainnet through this infrastructure. And we're going to be onboarding teams and cohorts, sort of starting with some of the earliest supporters and builders on the network, and prioritizing projects that have mainnet requirements or production requirements sooner. And over time, as that program progresses, which doesn't really have a set end date, we're going to be progressively decentralizing the network throughout the program. So the first couple cohorts will be running and interacting with mainnet through 3Box Labs hosted infrastructure. Potentially one of the cohorts after that might be a cohort of people that want to run their own ceramic infrastructure. And so we're sort of starting to decentralize the network through more people running nodes and infrastructure. And by the end of the program, moving further down the decentralization spectrum to an open network. So that's generally the plan. It's not that we want to be the only providers of infrastructure, because Ceramic is an open network and will be self-sustaining and decentralized. We just want to make sure that we can deliver on the performance and stability guarantees for the earliest partners. And we see that as sort of the quickest way to make that happen, versus sort of just trying to all at once launch the entire decentralized network, which has introduces so many variables that we just want to make sure we're doing it in a smart way. Spencer, anything to add there?
No, I think that's spot on. You nailed, that's sort of the considerations.
And we're pairing that and continuing work on that front. And there's all of the sort of supporting tooling, libraries, components that developers will be using like on top of the core Ceramic network, like 3ID Connect, which is sort of the way that users can authenticate to your application interface from a blockchain wallet. So basically like using MetaMask or any other provider to authenticate a DID and manage that DID. We just took on like a whole refactoring project there. Paul, I know was on. Is he still on? No, it looks like Paul may have dropped. But Zach, do you want to share a bit of the work that we've been doing on 3ID Connect, at least at a high level?
Yep. Wait till my video comes on. Yep. Yeah, not too much to share yet. It still looks the same as it has. If anyone's seen it the last few weeks or last few months, mostly refactoring it and building out ways for people to actually manage all these DIDs in 3ID Connect. So 3ID Connect's like the easiest way to get a DID provider in your app if you have a browser app. It's the way to manage multiple DIDs and then link all these different blockchain accounts. So by default before, it was mostly just taking like, for example, like your MetaMask wallet or like an Ethereum provider, and then creating, an address link to a DID, and then creating it manages the DID key pairs so that you can interact with Ceramic after. So some of the work we added now is easy ways to add like providers from other blockchains. And then like, for example, look up the DIDs you have and then select which ones you want to link your account to, or link like a bunch of different blockchain accounts to the same DID, for example. And we separated out a few core libraries that allow you to use some of the core features that supports, basically like managing multiple 3Ds. Those will be separated out into separate libraries and modules. Yeah, so I think probably by next time we'll have like a little demo of it.
Yeah, lots of refactoring, which seems boring until it all works well. And what else has everyone been working on? I guess core devs.
Yeah, I can give an update on what's happening on core protocol side. By far the biggest thing we've been working on is the work Sergey talked about before on like just refactoring a ton of the internal code for state management with big performance gains and memory utilization improvements that'll be getting released probably any day now. We did a release last week of JS Ceramic, which included an upgrade to the version of IPFS we use internally. That is like it involves a upgrade to the data storage format that IPFS uses. So if you upgrade your ceramic, if you have like if you're running a clay testnet node right now, and it has data pinned for certain documents, which involves pinning the underlying IPFS records as well. When you upgrade to the new version of Ceramic, it'll perform a repository migration of the IPFS data, which basically means that you will not be able to downgrade back to the old version of Ceramic easily because the data format will have changed. But it should be in all of our testing, it's been pretty seamless. And there hasn't been you haven't seen any real problems or complications from it. It just works. So that also, we had reports from some people in the field with trying to build their applications, having some version mismatch errors where like we were using an old version of the CIDs library and an old version of the multi-formats library. And so people who were using other pieces of software that had requirements to use the newer versions of the CIDs library or the newer versions of the multi-formats library had incompatibilities. This new upgrade should help fix a lot of that, hopefully. And now that all had to happen alongside the IPFS upgrade. So that's sort of one big thing that's happened recently. Another thing is a heads up, the most recent release that we did last week that included this also introduced a bug. This was my fault that broke the ability to use Ceramic in browser. Or not the ability to use it, the ability to build it with certain bundler software like Webpack and other software bundling and distribution software for web use.
Just to add some more details there. It's basically like using some specific node specific things, and it's not being used in the browser. So you could, like, when you're building it with Webpack or with your bundler, you could just like disable those packages. But it's like an annoying thing that you shouldn't have to do, and we're working on fixing that.
Yeah, so we have a fix in flight right now. So hopefully in the next day or two, we'll have a new release that unbreaks that and allows, you know, it to seamlessly and effortlessly work in browser again. The next thing, as part of that upcoming release, we're doing a small, somewhat breaking change to the protocol. You know, as we're getting close to mainnet, we're trying to sort of batten down the hatches and make sure that once mainnet is out, we don't, you know, any changes to the protocol become much more difficult because we have to be really, really careful about changing the behavior for applications. So one thing that we are doing right now is a change to the way when you create a tile document, there's an option as part of creating a tile document called, there's a deterministic flag. By default, if two different applications create two different documents with the same content, they will be two different doc IDs. Or even if it was the same DID controller creating multiple documents with the same content, by default they'll be different. They'll get different DIDs, and that's because we encode a bit of uniqueness. We like randomly generate a string that like and put it into the metadata to make the document appear unique. But you have a flag where you can run with deterministic true, which would make it so that if the same DID creates a document with the same contents, it becomes the same, you get the same doc ID. It doesn't actually create a new document. It resolves and defines the already existing document. That's a really useful and a really powerful feature, but we're changing the way that information gets encoded in the wire protocol messages. So as part of that, existing new documents will be unaffected. Like none of the user visible behavior on new documents is going to change. But if you have an existing document that was on Clay testnet that was created with the deterministic true flag, then after the next release, if you create that same document with the same contents with the deterministic true flag, you would expect it to resolve to the same doc ID. The new release will resolve to a new doc ID. So it'll be as if the deterministic true flag didn't work. Basically, you know, deterministic documents created with the old version of Ceramic will be distinct from deterministic documents created from the new version of Ceramic. So it's a small, kind of subtle breaking change, and it won't, you know, going forward, it won't be a problem, and in mainnet it won't be a problem. But if you have documents that exist on Clay testnet right now, and you're depending on the behavior of the deterministic true flag, you will start getting new doc IDs just once after the upgrade, and then in the future it'll work the way it always has. This is probably most relevant for IDX. The IDX Index Document is a deterministic document that basically goes from the DID. So IDX creates an index that's associated with a DID. It uses the deterministic document property of Ceramic to, given a DID, find the IDX index document. So it means that when you upgrade to the newest version of Ceramic, when you go to find an index document for a given DID, you'll be getting a new clean index. Your IDX will sort of be cleared out over the next update on the Clay testnet. Are there any questions about that? I know it's like kind of technical and in the weeds a little bit, but I think the most important thing is, yeah, that the index will be clear just when you do the upgrade. But from that point forward, it'll be stable and work as expected. And this is just all part of our efforts to kind of future-proof our protocol and make it so that we don't have to do these types of changes in the future, where they'd be more disruptive.
Yeah, exactly. Like, to be very clear, like this is something that we're doing now. Because it's still like in the testnet phase. This is definitely not something that would happen once the mainnet is launched. Like then it's more set in stone, and you know, like we won't have these type of breaking changes.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's like, you know, to do these types of changes in a way that isn't breaking is possible, but a lot more work, like significant work to support sort of like asynchronous schema migrations of protocol changes. Like basically we're taking advantage of, you know, our ability to sort of make a minor breaking change and cause a little bit of inconvenience at the sake of sparing our development team a lot of work and a lot of energy and a lot of time. It all to the goal of getting mainnet out the door faster and getting to a more stable place faster. Once we have mainnet out the door, then we will never make that kind of, like, if we have to make a change to the protocol, we are committed to doing whatever work it takes, however long it takes, to do it in a way that is not backwards breaking and does not break existing users. But because our number one priority is getting mainnet out the door as fast as possible, we figured to getting to that end, a little bit of disruption now would be worth it.
Thanks. And so on sort of, I guess, wrapping up, because we're at an hour already, I think, which seemed really quick. So any last questions or thoughts? I mean, we're always available in Discord, and if you need help working through something or you want to chat with the community, everyone's been pretty engaged there. But while we have you here, any final questions or thoughts before we call it?
Just a message for Lee on the NFT plus identity and ticket. Take a look at Mintbase. They'll be integrating IDX sometime. They just postponed it because they're adding NIR. And we did due diligence on a bunch of solutions in that space, actually.
Great, I'm going to do that. Thank you.
And there's an NFT event on Tuesday. I'll put the link into the chat or someplace, but I pinged on LinkedIn too. I think we're going to talk about that as well at the event.
Great. I'll take this up in Discord, but can somebody, what is the view here of Alluvium and their content offering? They announced something at South by Southwest that's like a live streaming plus ticketing over their network. I mean, maybe that's a Discord question, but I'm really trying to connect the dots here between content distribution and some of these products, the way it's being committed. Is there somebody? I can go over Discord on this one, but this Mintbase is a good example.
Not totally that familiar with the platform, but if you ask in Discord, it'll give me a second to get up to speed.
Got it.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. We'll see you on Discord and in 6 weeks, and hopefully by then we'll have mainnet out. So keep an eye out, and we'd appreciate the support as we gear up for that. See y'all.